Hello, comic creators. Welcome back to the Comics Connection podcast, where we talk to you about the intricacies of the business and creative side of being a professional in the comic book industry. I'm Gamal. He's Andy. And today we are going to talk about a secret weapon that will almost invariably improve the quality and performance of your comics. And that secret weapon is getting an editor. A lot of times in the work that I do with my clients, they are building comic book companies. They are maybe launching their first comic. And when I ask them, who their creative team is, who they're working on with for production, and more than half the time, these individuals do not have an editor. They either decide because, costs are tight and there's certain positions that they know they need to fill, they figure the editorial position they can just do themselves and save some cash. Now, Andy, you have been an editor for in Marvel and Hasbro and IDW and CEX. So, can you talk a little bit about the importance of being in, well, what the function of an editor is in comics first? Let's start there.
Sure. So I usually explain it from like a high level view as the editor has two primary jobs. One is what I would call the fun part, which is creative development, giving notes and feedback or putting the right creative team together, a writer with this artist that produced something really cool, or even an artist with a color artist and they do something that's just like ups their game. That stuff is super fun and fulfilling. And the whole purpose there for the editor, like my barometer for it, or my rubric for it is kind of, does the whole project get elevated because the editor is involved, right? Like that's the whole point. And then the other function is more in line with like a project manager, right? So they're the ones that are, trying to make sure that everybody gets their work in on time, that it's good, that it gets from one person to the next person, that all the, everything is running smoothly and is done on budget, on time. That's the less fun part of it, unless you just really like spreadsheets. But those are the two kind of primary functions. Is, one is sort of like a logistics project manager role, and then the other is more of a creative partner role. Yeah, that's it.
Now, in quite a few cases, when someone comes to me and they actually understand that they might need an editor. One of the things that I also point out to them is, in many cases, if you pick the right editor, that person can also help you with recruitment. So many writers who want to get into comics, they don't know the right artist. They don't have a connection to the artist or the letterer or the colorist. And an editor might actually, because they've been in the business for a while, know all those people. And they know the right one that could actually fit for that particular project that you're working on. Would you consider that piece part of the creative part or part of the more project management side of it? You actually just got muted.
That, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. That is in that middle part of the Venn diagram where it is both creative and logistical. So like one of the things we do at Comics Experience for folks is we will edit and project manage, their comics projects. And when it's a, often it's a writer that doesn't know a lot of people in the industry and wants to get this thing out and wants to get it made to a professional level and that sort of thing. And so the first step for that, is figuring out who it's going to be. So one of the reasons that they come to us is that we know a whole lot of artists. And so what I'll do in that situation is I'll usually present, 3 portfolios of different artists. and well, I'll talk with the people first, see what kind of style they want, that sort of thing. Then try and sort of curate 3
Mhm.
portfolios to give them, to choose from. And if they really like one, then I'll seek that creator out and make sure they're available, obviously. And then you can do that within a budget too. Some people come in and it's like you were saying, like budget's tight. Some people come in and they've got a little bit more to spend and they want somebody with a bigger name, or they want, and coming to comics experience with the staff that we have, um, we know a whole lot of freelancers on a wide range of page rates and availability and all kinds of stuff. So that is definitely part of it. And along with that, I try to I will often suggest, I will almost never suggest put 3 portfolios out of people, of all 3 of whom I have never worked with.
Right.
So at least one of them, I'll say, I know this person. I've worked with them before, and they were good. They fulfilled their commitment. They got pages in on time, that kind of thing. And other times I'll say, I've never worked with this person before, but I've met them. I've reviewed their portfolio a couple of times. They've continued to improve when I've met them. But there's a little bit more of rolling the dice in that case.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because people can flake out or burn out or get sick or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes life gets in the way of comics. What is your response to people who decide that because it's their project and no one's going to be more into their project than they are, that it makes more sense for them to be the editor of their own book?
I don't usually argue with those people. I just I'm like, okay, well, good luck. I mean, I think one of the big nice things about an editor is that they aren't that close,
Mhm.
right? Like there is a distance, and they're also coming to it fresh, so they're much more likely to read something and be like, I'm a little confused here at this
Mhm.
section in the story, and be able to, and one thing a good editor will do is not just be like, I'm confused here, fix it, but
Mhm.
I'm confused here, and then help you work through why there's confusion and how to alleviate that confusion,
Mhm.
right? But a lot of people, especially writers, even very, very good ones, well established with decades long careers, have a tendency, they will write a scene or a sequence of dialogue, and they know what it's about and like all the subtleties that they're writing
Mhm.
into it, but that doesn't always come across on the page. So sometimes you have to kind of ring that bell and just be like, what is it you are going for here? Because what I'm getting is this, but I don't think
Mhm.
that's what you intend. So what do you intend? And kind of work with them that way. So just having that extra set of eyes that doesn't know everything that you know as the writer or artist is helpful.
Okay.
And it's more helpful if that set of eyes has training behind them and can
Mhm.
help you workshop those things. It's helpful to identify something's confusing, more helpful to identify what's confusing and then figure out the why behind it and the how to fix it. And a good editor should be able to help with that.
Okay. Okay. Now, what about the budget question? Well, let's go back a step. Artists and writers and letters and people like that are all paid on page rates. Are editors paid the same way in your experience?
Different editors prefer different ways of being paid. It probably also depends on their different situations, but
Mhm.
certainly you can pay a page rate. And the nice thing for the person paying is that you know your budget,
Mhm.
right? Like this is what it costs. What's scary for the editor is, well, what if this project is a nightmare project and it takes me 10 times longer than I think it will? And
Mhm.
I thought I was working for $50 a page, but it turns out I only worked for five, or $50 an hour. It turns out I only worked for $5 an hour in the
Mhm.
end,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
which has happened to me. So that's that's kind of the thing. And that's part of why that casting we were talking about putting together a creative team is really important for the editor too,
Mm,
because it could make everyone's lives much easier if you're working with people that, you know, do things on time and you know, don't need me to call them once a day, every day, just to chat and check in and keep them motivated. There are people I've worked with where that's part of the job. Like you kind of go in knowing like, okay, I got at least 20 minutes every day that is going to just be on the phone talking about whatever. It's not even talking about the project all the time. Sometimes just talking about whatever. Um, I had a guy I talked a lot of Phillies baseball, which is its own level of hell.
well, so it sounds like there's a certain amount of personal coaching and motivational speaking involved with being an
there,
editor as well.
there can be, yeah. I mean that's the thing, right? Is that every creative team is different. I mean, it's made up of individuals and individuals who all have say in the final project. Like it's not like a movie set where you can kind of interchange your gaffer and it's probably not going to affect the final product a ton,
Hmm.
right? But like what we're really talking about is you're interchanging your screenwriter, your cinematographer, your director,
Hmm.
and your main
Hmm.
actors, right? Like those things are going to make a big difference on the production, and they can make a difference on a production, just like on a is this fun level, like
Hmm.
to be here and to be on set, or they can make a they're certainly going to make a difference in production on are they is the final product good. So there is a lot of managing personalities and personality conflicts. A lot of people are using creators that are spread out across the globe.
Hmm.
um, and so you got to watch out for cultural differences, language differences. And sometimes that's fairly innocuous stuff, like, well, shouldn't use that turn of phrase because that's a uniquely American
Hmm.
phrase. um, so you learn pretty quickly to take things like that, colloquialisms out. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of personalities and sometimes big ones, and a
Hmm.
lot of people that work alone for a lot of years. So yeah.
Understandable. So now let's go back to the now that we understand the page rate idea, let's go back to the idea of how much the editor eats into a budget that may already be fairly small to begin with. How do you help creators who come to you manage that kind of, the financial challenges?
Yeah. um if it's a project that I really believe in, which is it's hard, if it's people I don't really know very well or I don't know at
Mm-hmm.
all, it's really tough to be like, well, I'll take a cut on the back end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because I don't know how easy or hard it's going to be to work with you. So that's that's tough. But if they're creators that I know, I've hopefully worked with before, then that's a little bit more of a known quantity, and then
Mm-hmm.
I could consider like, yeah, I can do this. It'd have to be kind of after my other paying work gets done that I can work on it. Um, and I could do it for, some sort of back end percentage or something like that, or some
Okay.
small ownership stake or something. Um,
Okay.
you know,
Now,
and hopefully what the editor is contributing is really helpful stuff, and it's interesting too, because I've had conversations with creators that I've done a lot of work with before, and then I've helped them on their series that they're doing at Image Comics, or they're going to crowdfund, or they're going to do over Dark Horse or wherever. And then once they get into it, they don't they either don't really use the editor a whole lot, like they just kind of go do it, and then like I'm sitting there like, what is my job? Like there have been a couple books I really liked. I mean, they were good. Where I've, after a couple of issues, I've just been like, I don't, you guys don't need me, and you should stop paying me,
mhm,
because like you got it, you're good to go. Um, and then there are other people that really value that feedback and really kind of use you the way
Mm,
So hopefully as an editor, especially if I'm going to get some sort of back end money or a small stake in it or something, then hopefully I'm contributing in a meaningful and an impactful way.
okay. No, that makes sense. My next question is a little bit different because sometimes, well, quite a few times, Commerce Connection members are looking for creator-owned deals, which means they have to work with editors from established companies, whether it be IDW or Dark Horse or Boom or whatever. How is the process of working with those in-house editors different from finding your own editor to build your own book to get your own book out in the world?
Um, the biggest difference between editorial jobs is not between who's an editor at a company and are you doing it on your own and hiring your own editor. There is a difference there, but the biggest difference is between the company or the editor, I guess could be theoretically the editor, owns and has final say over the
Mm-hmm.
property. So like if you're doing Spider-Man, then Marvel gets to say this is a go or a no-go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, versus creator owned, where the there's a very clear chain of command in the editor that works for DC Comics that hires the creators, right? There's a
Right.
very clear who gets to boss who around sort of thing. Not that you want to be bossy, of course, but when it's creator owned, it's a little bit weird because or when the creator is the owner of the property, right? It's a little bit weird because as the editor, I'm trying to manage the creative team, but the person above me is the creative team,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to really change the way you go into that, I think fundamentally. Um, and the biggest thing is for me is that everything, I'm not bossy even when I'm on staff. Like, I want to talk through things, make sure we're all on the same page and we're all agreed. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
ideal. Um, with something where the creator is the owner of it, then it's more like, hey, I've got these thoughts and I've got these suggestions, and you can take them or leave them because you're the
Mm-hmm.
boss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's kind of the difference. As for whether I'm on staff working on a creator-owned book, then you still have, with a larger, with a publishing company behind you, you have a little bit more leverage, I think, because you're like, they want to get this out, whether it's a scheduling thing or it's
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like there's a little bit more pressure you can use if you need to. But if it's somebody just doing it for themselves, like they're going to get it out whenever they get it out.
Right. Right. Okay. I guess the last question I have is what do you need if you're a creator and you decide you want to go out and find an editor? A, where would you go looking for these individuals? And B, what do you need to present to them to give them the information that they need to know whether or not they want the job and how it is they go about pricing that job for you? What do you need to tell them or give them?
Um, I think the hardest part is finding an editor because I see a lot of people online that say they're a comic book editor,
Mm-hmm.
that don't have much in the way of actual experience or training in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're often more just like readers. They'll read
Right.
it and they'll give you like a couple of thoughts, and that's kind of it. But they don't know the market real well, and they don't know. So I see that a lot, and I think it's unfortunate when somebody that really needs an editor hires somebody in that spot, and those people are usually doing that to get the training to learn the
Yes.
craft. But that could be, I'd rather not be the person that
Mm-hmm.
that trains them while paying them to do the job. um so in terms of finding an editor, honestly, I think the best thing to do is read comics and graphic novels that you like and see if you can't find a way to contact those people, that are the editors and assistant editors, perhaps on those projects. See if you can reach them via social media or wherever, however that you can, and ask them for advice of, hey, I'm looking for an editor. If you're able to freelance on top of your work and you're interested, I'd love to talk with you. When they say no, because they probably will,
Mm-hmm.
um, then the question is, do you know of anybody that maybe you used to work with that's not there anymore that might be interested? And that way you're at least getting some sort of level of
Referral.
professional
Hmm.
referral. And I do a fair amount of that. Like we're we're we hit capacity with our projects every once in a while, and then somebody will come and I'll look at the project. And one of the things I do is I only recommend people I know if I think the project is actually got a decent chance of being good and not a nightmare, because some
Hmm.
are nightmares. And then, yeah, I'll just recommend people I used to work with that I think are really good and might, want to do a little something on the side. Um, so even I do that sometimes. Um, yeah. And then in terms of what do they need to know, they need to know the project length. Are they responsible for finding creators on the team?
Hmm.
Um, what your budget is overall, how long you expect it to take, although you may not know the answer to that. That might be something you need the editor to help you figure out.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, if you have like a page count, like a specific page count and like number of covers that we're going to need to be done, that's that's ideal. And then the pitch, at the very least a pitch, so that the person can see what it looks like. Ideally, you'd have at least like 20 pages of script in place so that they can evaluate your scripts, which is really important because getting an idea of what the type of writer you are and how much work needs to be done on those scripts in order to get to the point where they can be drawn by a professional, um, is important.
Okay. All right. No, I think all of that is very helpful stuff. So to wrap up, to have a better chance of your comic being successful, both from a quality standpoint and from a time and budget standpoint, it makes sense to actually have an editor overseeing the project. There are some things you may need to do from a financial standpoint to make the numbers work, but ultimately, the if you can find an editor that adds value, it's going to be more than worth the money that you put in to have the editor as part of the team or as to have the editor, being the one leading the team. Is there any final thoughts, Andy, you wanted to throw out there before we wrap things up?
No, I guess maybe the last thing I would say is that a really good editor is part of the team, right? They're
Mhm.
not the boss. Me, you're saying leading. Like, my feeling is that somebody on the creative team has to have a vision. It doesn't
Sure.
have to be me as the editor. I mean, I also write. Sometimes it's the writer, sometimes it's the artist, but somebody needs to have a vision for what the project is, because that is something that the whole team can get around. And so, when I was working on, at Marvel, the office I was in with Tom and Nicole and Molly or Aubrey or whoever, we were putting out between 15 and 20 comics a month.
Mhm.
And like the three or four of us in the office couldn't have visions for each of those books, but
Mhm.
writers could or artists could and whatever. And you wouldn't want one person to have a vision on all of those things because then it gets very homogenous, right?
Right.
So that's one of the things I think is interesting is somebody needs a vision for the book that we can all kind of get on board with and work together as a team, and an editor should really help that and help make that a smoother, more effective process, and hopefully pretty fun. I mean, I like it. I love editing. I love writing too, but I think I'd be hard pressed to say which one I actually enjoy more. One is a
Mm.
very solitary thing, and I am introverted, and so solitary works for me. But the other is also like a way that I'm working on something I enjoy with people I enjoy, and so that's like a much more social thing. So they're
Okay,
very
but
different,
you
but they're very
you
fun.
did say that the editorial part involves more spreadsheets. So if you don't like spreadsheets, maybe one is better than the other.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, spreadsheets notwithstanding, we're gonna wrap it up there. There's quite a few people in Comics Connection who are editors with experience. So if you're looking for an editor, one of the places that you can find them would be Comics Connection if you join us on our Discord. There's going to be information on joining Comics Connection and getting your first month free in the show notes. But until next time, I'm Gamal. He's Andy. Thanks for listening and have fun.